My name is Jim Morris, and I'm honored and privileged to be here today to speak to you on a topic that's very important to the continuing work of this church. About 2 hours after Linda Stedman asked me if I would speak, I received an email. Kids in church. While it doesn't have anything to do directly with the task at hand, I can tell you that we all need to be very careful that what we intend to say is not always what is heard. There was a little boy named Reeves, 3 years old, went home from church and Sunday school, and his father said, "Reeves, what did you do in Sunday school today?" "We learned the Lord's Prayer," he said. The father said, "Well, can you recite it?" And he said, "Certainly." He stood up, folded his hands, and said, "Our Father who does art in heaven, hallowed be his name. Amen." And then Jason got in the car one Sunday morning after his little brother had been baptized. And as soon as he got in the car, he started crying. And he continued to cry. And his father said, "What's the problem?" And he couldn't speak. He was too caught up in his sorrow and his sobbing. And finally, as they turned on to the street where he lived, the father asked him the third time, "What's the matter?" He gathered himself and said, "Well, the preacher said we should all live in Christian homes, and I wanted to continue to live with you guys." I know that didn't happen here. The mission of the United Methodist Church is very clear, needs no explanation. It is very simple. We are to make disciples of Christ. The local church is the best vehicle to make that happen. No question about it. And what is the local church? You and I are the local church, called Union United Methodist. And our mission is to make disciples of Christ. And there are a number of ways that I see God at work in this church and have for years. Margaret and I joined this church in 1977, 32 years ago. I would qualify as an expert witness on seeing God at work through Union. In the first place, you see it, and I saw it as a child, which brought me to God, through individuals. And I'm going to hold up 2 saints. Some of you do not know them, buddy. I'm not going to turn this into an all-saints service. But my first introduction to God at work in Union was through Pauline Younger. Some of you knew her. Some of you heard of her. I was privileged early in our membership here to serve on the worship committee with her. Pauline had been a long-time servant of the worship committee and its chair. And she had a real devotion and reverence to the worship service and to the giving of the sacraments at Union. She was a warrior, if you will, in the UNW, United Methodist Women. She helped start different organizations. She toiled daily. She served that program of United Methodist Church, this church in particular. She was a caring, loving individual, and you can clearly see God at work through Pauline Younger. The next person that became obvious to me almost as soon as I met him, Bubba Price. Bubba Price is the epitome of what it means to be a servant of God. If there was labor needed at this church, Bubba showed up. If somebody needs transportation, Bubba provided it. He was visiting the sick and the shut-ins, fully understood and lived the life of servanthood for God, church, and the greater community. We all need to take lessons from those saints, because that's what God is calling all of us to do today. I know I need to do a better job in measuring up. And I assume everyone here could be prayerful about how we well we are serving God. And there are other saints of this church. And there are some people present in this sanctuary today, behind me and in front of me, where I see God at work routinely. I'm not going to call your name because as soon as I do, somebody's going to say, well, why didn't he mention Uncle Ed's or Aunt Susie? So we're not going to get into a list of where we see that. But we all, as Methodists, are called to a life of service. Service to God, service to the church, and service to the community. And the missions and ministries of this church and the programs and activities, we see that happening all the time. And Jim mentioned several, Annie's mentioned some. All we've got to do is look for those opportunities to be a better servant of God through the ministries of the church. If you can't speak, if you can't sing, you can be there to show support and be helpful in any way you can. You don't have to stand up and be a leader to serve. God needs everybody, and this church needs everybody. One of the things, and I have to say, Suzanne, if you don't see God through this choir, you're not listening. When we join the Methodist Church, we pledge to support this church with our prayers, our presence, our gifts, and our service. It's on your pledge card. Take it seriously. Frequently, I have it. And routinely, when we do baptism services, we renew our covenant and don't think anything about it. We say the Lord's Prayer. We don't think anything about it. We all need to pay more attention to what is said, what is sung, and what is felt and seen in the everyday life of this church. Now, the final comment. None of this happens by accident. We have a well-organized structure created by the discipline of the Methodist Church. We just need everybody to pray, and to pray regularly, and to pray intently. We need everybody to be here when the door is open, and we need you to find places, and me to find places where we can provide service to this church. That's the only way we're going to make disciples of Christ. And that's our charge. That's our mission. We got to pay the water bill. We got to pay the light bill. We got to pay the staff. We got lots of expenses. So be generous in your financial gifts that we're going to pledge here today. May God bless you, this church, and our mission.